When I was a kid, I had an irrational fear of our basement. Though, if I do say so myself, our basement was kind of scary for a kid. It was a pretty big basement. There was an L-shaped couch right in the middle of the basement that sat right in front of a wooden support column. In front of the couch was the big old TV we had down there, which had all of our video game consoles plugged into it. The layout of the basement was set up as a big circle that went around the couch. Basically, there was a booth and table in one corner, an old bar in the other corner which had the door to the laundry room behind it, and then in the other corner, closest to the stairs, was the doorway to my dad's little workout room. My dad rented out the upstairs of the house to an old lady named Nellie, so we only had access to the first floor and the basement. My dad would usually hang out in the living room on the first floor, hence why our video games were all downstairs on the crappy TV, because our dad didn't really hang out down there. I'm the youngest sibling. I have 2 older brothers. I was anywhere from 6 to 8 years old when this happened. My older brothers weren't home, so they must have been having playdates with other kids. It was just my mom and I home at the time. My dad was likely at work. Usually, I'd be playing video games with my brothers in the basement, so I wouldn't be scared. But since I was alone, I remember being kind of creeped out as I walked down the stairs. That basement door sucked because it wouldn't stay open by default. It would just slowly creep shut unless something was propped in front of the door to keep it open. So, it just made me feel even more isolated from the upstairs and my mom. I was playing whatever old video games I was into at the time alone on that gray fluffy couch. Any little sound in the basement would make me pause my game and look in whatever direction I heard it. There would always be creepy sounds that would come from the laundry room, and even though I grew to expect them, they'd still sometimes creep me out. They were usually familiar sounds, though, and so when I heard an unusual sound come from inside the laundry room, I paused my game. It wasn't the sound of the laundry machine or the boiler clacking, it was the sound of something dropping to the floor and bouncing once or twice. I remember jumping off the couch and running upstairs to find my mom, saying, "There's someone in the basement." I remember my mom's calm reaction and asking me what happened, and then explaining to me that nobody was down there to make me feel better. She went back down to the basement with me and she opened the door to the laundry room, turned on the light, and looked inside for a few seconds. Then she shut the door and said, "There's no one in there." So, naturally, I felt better, and she went back upstairs and I went back to playing video games. I can't remember how much time passed before I went back upstairs to eat a snack. My mom was already preparing dinner. I remember it being dark out now, which only added to my fear of the basement. The basement had 2 small windows, which did allow some light in during the day, so at night it was just completely pitch black down there. I did end up going back down there, though, and then eventually I heard the sound of the heater in the laundry room turn on, only it was extremely loud. I turned around and noticed the laundry room door was now open. I got off the couch and slowly walked to the laundry room door. It was pitch black inside of there. I was scared to turn on the light, I just wanted to shut the door. I gathered up enough courage to run at the door and slam it shut, and then run back to the couch. For some reason, I just felt safer on the couch. I guess, for whatever reason, I didn't once think that it was strange that the door was magically open now, even after my mom had closed it earlier. The next thing I remember was hearing a man's voice from behind me, and at first, my brain didn't register what I had just heard. It didn't seem real at first. I turned around and saw some sickly-looking man sitting in the booth in the corner of the basement with his arm on the table and his head resting on his fist. He said, "My God, how you've grown." I was frozen stiff. I couldn't even scream. I just looked at the man in the corner with my mouth hanging open, twitching. He slowly stood up in this crooked, hunched-over posture, and it seemed like he was slowly starting to walk towards me as he said, "Your mother won't let me see you guys." I finally was able to scream, and I just bolted for the stairs. I was screaming, "Mom," the whole way up to the kitchen. I slammed the basement door and locked it. I screamed and cried to my mom that there's a man downstairs. I saw the look on her face and she was petrified. She called 911, and I strangely don't remember what happened in the moments before the police showed up. I just remember a bunch of police officers getting there and going down to the basement. I was with my mom and a police officer in a safe room while they found him. The man they found was my uncle, my estranged uncle, my mom's brother, who was basically excommunicated from our family for being a child rapist. Our parents never wanted him anywhere near us, nor did my mom want any contact with him. He had broken into the house and had been hiding in the basement for God knows how long. I didn't even know his face, as the last time I'd seen him I was a baby. I haven't seen him since then. He went back to prison for another 4 years for another sex crime. We don't know where he is now. When my grandparents passed away, instead of my parents selling their house, they just let me live in it instead, since I was of moving out age anyway. I just had to pay the taxes and monthly expenses. At first, I really enjoyed living alone, given that I could have whoever I wanted over whenever I wanted, but it quickly got lonely being alone. So, I got myself a 2-year-old German Shepherd dog named Rocky. He was named after Rocky Balboa. Rocky's a very calm and gentle German Shepherd. He hardly ever barks, only when he feels threatened or if he's playing with another dog. I bought him a doggy bed the day after I adopted him and put it next to my bed. After I got Rocky, I always let the bedroom door open so that he could go get water at night if he was thirsty. One night soon after I adopted Rocky, I woke up to his barking coming from outside my room and down the hallway. I dizzily got out of bed to check what the hell he was barking at. I rubbed my eyes as I walked down the hallway. And when I opened them, I saw Rocky maniacally barking and clawing at the basement door. I didn't know what to do. Usually, I'd call my dad to deal with something like this, but now it was on me, and I was terrified. I had to ask myself if I wanted Rocky to go down there with me, and I quickly realized there was no chance of me going down there alone. I opened the door ever so lightly, but it was enough for Rocky to push it open with his nose and run down the stairs. I flipped on the lights and followed close behind. Rocky was silent now, which I found a bit concerning. I looked around for him, calling his name, and then I saw him standing still with his tail between his legs, looking up at something in an opposite corner of the room that was blocked by a wall. Rocky looked at me, and his tail slightly raised as I approached him. I could now see what he was looking at. It was a closet door. Rocky's apparent bout of confidence was obviously short-lived, and he seemed to be back to his cautious self. All that was passing through my mind at that moment was, do I dare open this closet door right now, and who or what could be in there? I didn't know Rocky too well just yet, but I had a feeling he wouldn't attack whoever or whatever was in there. I'm still not sure whether I made the right move or not, but instead of opening that closet door, I took Rocky by the collar and walked with him back upstairs. He kept looking back at the corner of the basement until we got to the stairs. I shut the basement door and then dragged him back to my bedroom and shut the bedroom door. Then I went to the kitchen to call my dad. I had to call 3 times before he finally picked up. In a groggy voice, I explained the situation and asked him what I should do. He said I should go back down there with a huge knife or some kind of weapon and see what's in the closet. I told him I was too scared to, and somewhere deeper into that conversation with my dad, I realized the basement door was open. I put the phone down for a second to listen to what I felt were footsteps. And I was right, loud and clear were footsteps heading towards the front door. I ran to my bedroom and told my dad. He told me to hang up the phone and call the cops, so I did. By the time the cops showed up, though, whoever was in the house was obviously gone already. Unfortunately, I left a large amount of cash down there by the bar, and all of it was gone. The basement window was wide open, so we found the method of entry pretty quickly. It turned out to be a break-in burglary when I happened to be home. My parents live next door to a small red house. Our backyard faces the side of their house, which has a deck and 2 large windows. Around front, there were always at least 3 cars parked outside. Oddly enough, in the 10 years I lived there, I never saw anyone enter or leave. Once, when I was 11, I saw shadows thrown against the far wall that was visible through one of the windows. When my sister moved out, I took her bedroom, a large open converted space in the basement, which had a door and an outdoor stairwell that led to the backyard. The door had a small window on it, which my sister had covered with a Pulp Fiction poster. I redecorated and replaced the poster with some of those sheer half-curtain things. The way the room was set up, if I was lying in bed or sitting on the couch, I was facing the door. When I first moved down there, I noticed that sometimes at night I would hear the sound of leaves crunching in the stairwell. I chalked it up to being my cat, who liked to roam the neighborhood. I really had no reason to suspect otherwise until a few weeks later. One night, when my parents were away on business, my boyfriend and I were sitting on the couch smoking. Suddenly, he got really stiff and was just staring at the window. I asked him what was wrong, and he said, "I just saw a camera flash." I kind of just laughed it off and chalked it up to him being high. Who would want a picture of 2 people getting stoned? Still, the seeds of paranoia had been sown, and it wasn't easy to get settled down for sleep that night. I kept looking at the gap between the curtains. There was no light at the bottom of the stair, so if someone really was down there, I'd be none the wiser. At around 3, I heard the distinct sound of leaves under heavy boots, definitely not a cat. I don't know what made me decide the best course of action was for me, standing all of 5 feet 3 inches, to confront a potential stalker myself. I didn't even put shoes on, I just threw the door wide open. There was no one in the stairwell, so I ran up the stairs and into the backyard. Suddenly, there was a man in his mid-40s, maybe 6 feet tall and wearing one of those mechanic jumpsuits. He was holding a chunky, outdated digital camera. We stood there for a second, just looking at each other. He seemed quite confused when he saw me. After what felt like an eternity, I remembered how to speak. "What the hell are you doing?" My voice seemed to startle him, and he immediately turned and ran through my backyard towards the red house and into the dark. After that, I didn't see any strange flashes of light or hear any crunchy leaf noises. It really freaks me out to think how many nights he could have just been standing there in the dark, watching me. It was approaching Halloween. We were in the middle of October. My cousin Connor's birthday is October 15th, so for his 12th birthday, we all went over to our Uncle Aiden and Aunt Nava's house, as they were throwing him a family birthday party. We have a pretty big family, and so our family gatherings can often get hectic. It was still warm outside, so the party was mostly in the backyard. Their house is pretty big, and we always used to love playing hide-and-seek type games because of it. Connor and I are the same age. My older brother David is 2 years older than me. He would play with us too. Our other cousins were a little older, but they'd still play with us too. We would just make teams and take turns as hiders and seekers and give each other time limits to find the opposing hiding team. If you were found, you'd have a chance to run outside to the backyard to be safe. If you managed to not get tagged, we could use the whole house minus our aunt's and uncle's bedroom, and I'm not exaggerating when I say there were hundreds of places to hide in the basement. There's a separate room that's considered Aunt Nava's fashion room, as we call it. She's a fashion designer, and inside of it, she has a bunch of mannequins with different pieces of clothing she's designed. Some are full-body mannequins, others are just torsos without heads and regular stands underneath them. She also has some studio lights, some official camera equipment, and a green screen drop. We had been playing the game for a little while already. David and I were hiding now. We both chose to hide in the basement. David hid somewhere in the main section of the basement, while I hid in the fashion room. I actually grabbed 2 blankets from the ottoman in the basement and brought them into the fashion room, one for me to hide under and the other one I was going to throw over one of the mannequins as a decoy. With the blanket thrown over it, it genuinely looked like it could be a person hiding underneath. I thought it would be a funny little gotcha moment whenever someone yanked the sheet off of it. So, I got into my hiding position under a desk in the corner of the room and I hid under the blanket. Now it was a waiting game. That was honestly a big chunk of the game, if your hiding spot was good. After quite a long time, I heard commotion outside in the main room of the basement, as David and one of my cousins were laughing and yelling, presumably as David was being chased around the basement. I heard them then stomping up the stairs. By the sound of it, David was trying to make it to the yard without being tagged. After that, I waited in silence for over 10 minutes easily. I was getting uncomfortable in this position and quite honestly bored. Finally, David came downstairs into the room and called my name, and then he said the food was being served outside, so the game was over. I was starving. I hurriedly rushed upstairs into the backyard where all the catered food was now out and being served. At some point after eating and having a conversation with Aunt Nava, I remembered that I totally left those 2 blankets in her fashion room. Most importantly, that I left one over her mannequin, which she would not be happy about. So, after going to the bathroom, I went back down to the basement and to the fashion room where I turned on the light and saw that the blanket was no longer on that mannequin but rather covering something else. It appeared to be another mannequin, though this one seemed to be propped in a seated position, which I wasn't aware of any mannequins that were in a seated position. The closer I got, I started to realize that it was moving and I heard breathing. On top of that, there was this funky smell that wasn't there before. There was a person under there, but who? I laughed and said, "Who is that?" They didn't answer. I felt this feeling of uneasiness growing in my stomach. I looked down to see if I could see the shoes they were wearing, but what I saw were the bare feet of a black person. Nobody at this party was black back then. I turned and headed for the door. I rushed back outside and said to my uncle to call the police. "There's someone in the basement." Others overheard me and panic quickly ensued. My uncle and a few others rushed down to the basement. I followed behind. When we got to Aunt Nava's fashion room, the blanket was now on the floor and whoever was underneath it was gone. I swore up and down that someone was just underneath it, explaining the bare feet and the smell. A bunch of family members searched the whole house and ultimately my uncle called the police, taking my claims very seriously. When the police showed up, it was kind of a whole scene, and everyone at the party was concerned. Neighbors even came out to see if everything was okay. Every possible hiding place was checked, and no one was in the house. I didn't make it up, though. It was genuine what I saw, and I just wish he did turn up so that everyone would have seen I was right. Even if mostly everyone did believe me, I still just wanted them to see what I saw for themselves. During parties, they leave the doors unlocked since family circulates in and out for hours. So it's no shocker that someone off the street could have just walked right in, maybe a homeless person, which would account for the smell. The whole thing still just felt so crazy, and it's a haunting memory for sure. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.